Well, I cheated on my diet today, but don't worry, I'm going to get back on track tomorrow, just like all the other times I said I would. But don't worry, this time is going to be different. Why? Well, that's a really good question. What's shaking, bacon? My name's Bruno Pinucci. I've been doing a carnivore diet for about a year and a third now, and inconsistently, I've been doing it since about 2013, the end of 2013. And I was doing a very low carb diet back then. I was basically doing a carnivore diet with lots of lettuce. But lately, since 2018, I started trying carnivore. And as of 2021, January 2021, I actually started getting way more strict with it. And I didn't have a lick, taste, or bite of anything that hasn't been on a carnivore diet. Now, periods of time, I go from the carnivore diet to the lion diet, and that's just ruminant animals. So mainly beef, lamb, water, and salt. So I've been cutting back on my salt, and I feel pretty good doing it. But that's me. That's me being strict. I actually feel better doing the lion diet. It's easier, it's cheaper, it's more satiating. I really enjoy it when I do this carnivore diet. And I've been limiting myself to 4 pounds of meat a day. The odd time, if I'm really hungry because I had a big workout, I might do 4.5 pounds. But typically, 4 pounds of meat. Now, like I said before, I haven't cheated. I was just demonstrating the frame of mind people often have, including myself, on and off for years and years and years, with going into any way of eating. When you want to do some sort of diet or you want to get back on track because you notice for weeks or months now, maybe years, you've gotten further and further away from living a healthy lifestyle. And this can apply to anything in life. This attitude of where you're constantly negotiating with yourself and you're constantly losing the battle in the long run. You're winning little wars, but you're always losing the battles. It can really zap a lot of the stamina out of you. So what I want to do is discuss the frame of mind people get in when they start negotiating with themselves. And they start saying to themselves, yeah, I'm going to get back on track. January 1st. January 1st is the day I'm going to get back on track and everything's going to be good. And then it lasts 6 weeks, 8 weeks or so, and it just falls apart slowly, sometimes all at once. And it can be around a family function, or it can be around holidays, or you were hungry one day and you slipped up. This can apply to exercising. This can apply to weight loss. This can apply to almost anything, maybe getting up at a certain time of the day. Pick the topic. But since this is a carnivore channel, we're going to discuss it around carnivore. How often have you been telling yourself you're going to get on track and you're going to get your health prioritized, and you give yourself a pep talk and you even stack the deck in your favor, but still over time, you go back to your old habits and way of eating? So that's exactly what part of the problem is your old habits. You have to recognize what some of your old habits are. Is it snacking? Do you like to snack at the end of the day on munchies? Are you always going to a drive-through first thing in the morning? And when you get your morning coffee, sometimes you get a little donut or something like that with it. Now, when you have your coffee, you automatically think croissant or donut, or whatever it is that you often have with that breakfast. What I want you to do is stop and ask yourself, whatever time of the day it is, recognize it. Write it down. Make a list of the things, and not just a mental list. Start making a list, maybe on your phone, because you probably always have your phone with you. Start making a list of things you're doing that you're sabotaging yourself with whenever you go off track. Because every time you go off track, you've lost that little battle. And you start negotiating with yourself again. Okay, Monday, I'm going to get back on track on Monday. You give yourself a treat meal or a treat day or anything like that. Or maybe you just gave in to temptation and you go back. But the problem is you go back negotiating, and you negotiate with yourself. Sometimes you say it to a loved one or a friend, but often you're saying it to yourself. I went through negotiation pretty bad on and off through the years. I want to tell you my experience and what changed for me. So when I was negotiating with myself, probably since my 20s, my very early 20s, was when I started to put weight on. And I started to put weight on with hypothyroidism. So I put on 40 pounds in 3 months, and I hadn't changed anything in my lifestyle or diet. But after that first 40 pounds, I didn't mind the first 40. Because I was getting into bouncing a lot, and I was a young man, and I knew the extra weight would come in handy, and it did. So I didn't mind the first 40, but then it turned into 60, and then it turned into 80, and then I was in the high 200s, and I was like, oh man, like this is starting to get out of hand. And probably from about 240 to 300 pounds, I was always negotiating with myself, and it never lasted very long. I would try and give myself a reason to get on track, and I would give myself a little game plan that would last, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks or something like that. And I could always get fast results. So that was one of the advantages of having a lot of muscle on my body and being a young man. It didn't take much to just tweak my diet or exercise to get some good results. But then I'd always go back to a bad way of eating, because when I lost a lot of weight as a teenager, and I'm talking probably about 150 pounds or so, I never corrected the original problem with my weight loss. When they say you can't out-exercise a bad diet, I'm living proof you can. I did it, and I can show you photos sometime of it. I worked out like a fiend, but only for a half hour a day, and it was a weight routine, and I created a circuit training routine by accident, and I lost all that weight. So I didn't change my diet at all. I still had tremendous amounts of food. You know what teenage boys eat like? Well, double that. And that's probably what I was eating. You know, I would easily have half a pizza or 3/4 of a pizza. I would easily have 3 platefuls of heaping mashed potatoes. You know, whenever I had the chance, I was eating, and I was eating a lot. So I never corrected that problem. So when my metabolism slowed down in my early 20s, boom, that bad diet caught up with me. Now it was easy to lose all that weight. I didn't even try to lose all that weight through exercise. So you can out-exercise a bad diet. But by the time I was 20, I wasn't quite exercising as much. So between my thyroid problem and not exercising as much, my weight came on. And by the time I was 23, I was up at around 290 or 295. And I lost probably about 50 pounds, and I was looking pretty good. I was still a big guy, but I had a good amount of muscle on me. So I was running a lot at the time. I wasn't doing much weight training. And I really enjoyed that time I was running. But I started taking control of my diet a little bit at that point, and I was starting to experiment with extremely low carb dieting. And it was honestly one of those soup diets, but that's really what it was. It was an almost zero carb diet. So I had some vegetables in there, but there were no starchy vegetables. I think once a week I was allowed to have a potato. And I found something that seemed to work, but it wasn't sustainable because it was high on vegetables, low on protein, and extremely low on fat. So it wasn't sustainable. I honestly feel like I finally found something I wish I could go back and tell my younger self about, to say, hey, you can eat this way, you can eat till you're satisfied, and you'll always be comfortably full, and you'll continue to lose weight and manage your weight really well if you do this carnivore way of eating. So it's so easy to maintain. There's no desire for me to go off of this anymore. I've never done anything this long, this easy in my life when it's come to diet. Why do you keep negotiating with yourself and telling yourself you're going to start this tomorrow or next week or at the beginning of the month, and you're just going to indulge in the meantime because you're negotiating with a carbohydrate and sugar addiction? You can't negotiate when it comes to addiction. If indeed carbohydrate addiction or sugar addiction is your problem, once you cut it out, you'll find out if it's your problem or not. That's for sure. You're fooling yourself when you're telling yourself you're going to change your ways as of tomorrow, but you keep going back to the same way of changing your ways over and over again. You keep going back to all the things that you've done before and failed at. What eventually changed for me was when I put my dog down. It was really tough. I did not expect that. It threw me for a loop. And I went and binged for 4 months straight. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I lived off of pizza and ice cream. Every day I would go to sleep thinking, I got to get this up back on track. And then the next morning I'd wake up and it'd be like, okay, I'm going to do good. I'm going to take some meat out, and I'm going to cook some meat, and I'm going to eat what I should be eating, nice healthy food for the day. And by 10 o'clock, I was ordering a pizza. When I went to get the pizza, I would go and get ice cream. And then I would come back and eat the pizza and ice cream, and I would stuff myself with it. And then I wouldn't eat again probably for the rest of the day. And if I did go back and eat, I was eating pizza and ice cream, whatever was left over, if there was anything left over. And I'm talking huge amounts of pizza and ice cream. So I did that for 4 months. And what changed was my mindset. Was after 4 months, I saw how far gone I was. I literally lived off pizza and ice cream for 4 months. That's a bit of an exaggeration. There were some M&Ms in there. And maybe once every couple weeks, I went to my parents for dinner and had something like steak or chicken. But you know what? Then I would end it with ice cream and cake. So let's go over the mindset. What makes you think this time is going to be different? If it's going to be the same old song and dance of going through this negotiation with yourself, where you do this every few weeks or every few months, you're not going to change anything if you keep going back to this frame of mind, right? It's the same thing that keeps tripping you over and over again. And it's you, it's your thinking. You're negotiating with yourself and you're losing. That's the worst part of it. You're losing with yourself. You're not even negotiating with a stranger. You're trying to convince yourself of something you know you need. You don't have an eating problem. Well, you do, but it's not just an eating problem. It's a thinking problem. It's not just an eating problem. It's a thinking problem. It's not just an eating problem. It's a thinking problem. You have a thinking problem. Your relationship with food isn't right because you're dealing with that sugar addiction most likely. What changed for me was I basically had a bit of a out-of-body experience. You hear smokers or alcoholics do this where one day they just realize it just hits them. And they go, wow, that was it. I just realized how far gone I was when it came to sugar and carbohydrate addiction. And since then, I've lost well over 100 pounds. So I've lost 150 pounds, more than that actually, total. So this is actually a journey for me, and I still have some more to go. And I had to eventually sort of hit a rock bottom and really binge for a ridiculous amount of time before I came to my senses. Now, I want to save you from going through something silly like that. Now, keep in mind, I negotiated that sort of eating through, over 15 years of gout, almost 20 years of gout, a heart attack, a major heart attack. I want you to stop and think about different ways you've set yourself up for success and different ways you failed with those successes. If you made sure to have breakfast every morning so that you wouldn't be too hungry for lunch, that's really good. But you forget to bring your lunch to work, well, that's bad. So I want you to write everything out, what you used to do and how it went wrong. I want you to learn from these past mistakes. If your health isn't enough of a priority and you keep using this negotiation tactic where you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to get on track on Monday. And it's say Friday or Saturday. No, that's not the way to think. That's always what I fell into. I fell off the wagon. I'm changing it from the next meal, not tomorrow. It's not a fresh day's start. It's not a new fresh week or a new fresh month start. Sometimes you give in to those temptations. That's unfortunately a part of this process until you get to the point where you've conquered it. It's bad enough you fell off the wagon. The last thing you want to do is lie to yourself about getting back on it. So at this point, I want you to create a plan. Find something that you can do, a structure, a schedule, and a backup plan for that plan so that you can turn around and not only correct your habits, but your way of thinking. When you start engaging in this process and you start thinking your way out of this and recognizing your old habits that you had with the new habits you're building, after a while, those new habits start taking over for those old habits. You can't replace old habits with nothing. You have to replace old habits with new good habits. If it takes writing everything down at the end of the day about everything positive that you did, some positive affirmations, that's maybe a good way to go. Maybe doing a checklist. So maybe at the end of the day, you can see on a calendar in your phone, or maybe even with a calendar on the wall, you can see these big check marks about the things you succeeded in doing. Maybe that's not a bad way to go. You want to show that you've conquered this way of thinking. So at this point, you're doing pretty good. You've been sticking with this for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or maybe just a few days. Stop and assess. I've gotten to this point. I've sort of been on the brink of failure. I've been doing really good. And then all of a sudden I just go over the edge. Well, ask yourself, what was that? So doing a post-mortem on your way of thinking and the habits that you were in before and what led you to making those bad choices. It often wasn't just the circumstances you were in. It was your thinking. Were you hungry going into those situations? Did you maybe not have enough fat in your diet so you're eating lean and therefore you were a little more hungry? Was it because there were social settings and you always went to someone's house, maybe it was family or friend's house, or maybe you're on a date and maybe you didn't want to fly your freak flag too much and you're worried about maybe what other people would think? Well, maybe you shouldn't put yourself in those situations if that's the case. There were certain times I would leave my parents' place early in the beginning because I didn't want to tempt myself with dessert. Or I would just leave the room and just go somewhere else in the place, or maybe go outside and play with my dog while dessert was being served, just so I wasn't sitting in front of it when I was sort of inclined to cheat, right, in the very beginning. So at this point, we've gone through all these steps. I want you to create a bit of an archive. And this archive is going to show all the steps from the first step to this last step, what you've done and how you're changing your old habits. Recognize your old habits, how you're progressing with the new ones, and what you're doing to change out of the old habits and ways you're going to correct this old way of thinking and convert to this new way of thinking. And keep reinforcing that with yourself. I want you to have tools that you're not negotiating so much with yourself. Really what you're doing is coming up with a plan, a strategy, because what you don't want to do is go into this with wishful thinking. You want to go into this with a plan to try and minimize any difficulties you're going to have that are going to screw yourself up down the road, so that you don't have to negotiate with yourself, because you're never going to be able to win that negotiation. You're always going to be on the losing side because you're probably dealing with that addiction. So recognize it for what it is. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care. And if you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment if you like. Have a good day.